Chi Minh City, crazy traffic everywhere. See this building over here? It's the immigration office. I've just been there with some questions. Very helpful, no problems. But what happens when the traffic gets to be too much and you want some peace and quiet? Go to a park. There's plenty of them. So let's go and investigate. I know some people who watch my channel may be a bit worried that it's going to be a careening solo camera vision, subjective point of view of a very confused and unstable person. Yes, I've done a couple like that, but not today. I'm going to sit down somewhere. And this is what you find in the parks. Look at the people exercising. Xin chào. Okay, Vietnamese teacher, that's good. What have they got there? Looks like a camera. It is a camera. I saw some people filming. TV. Oh, there we go. Vietnam television? Okay, it is. Oh, look, here they go. So you can join a group. I think around 6 in the morning you'll find people doing Tai Chi in the park. And the further you go into the park, of course, the further you get away from traffic sounds. These ladies sweeping the park. Let's go and have a look at them. The daily life. Ah, here we are. Xin chào. Xin chào. Sweeping up the leaves. You wouldn't think you'd see autumn leaves in a tropical country, would you? The legacy of the French. The French have gone but left their autumn leaves behind. Now here's something you see in parks which is great. You don't have to go to the gym. It's all just laid on in the public parks. It's free. Just come down and work out. And crazy traffic over there. So you can do your daily workout, chat with a neighbour. Now this park, oh, I forgot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down, find a spot, and then we're going to go over some Vietnamese legends. We're going to read some. But first we just have to find that spot, and I've got a little portable tripod with me, so I'm going to mount the camera on the tripod. You're just not going to have to worry about my ceaselessly roaming camera. A little gazebo here. Look at this. Now there's another area of this park. There's a road there. This park continues over there, and there's a little sculpture garden. It's quite nice. And then just beyond that is the famous Independence Palace. Sure, I hope there's no snakes here in the park. Xin chào. Do the gardening. Oh, I can smell the fresh grass. So I can sit down, find that spot, put the camera on a tripod, and then, oh look, so much to see. We could just do it here, I think. A perfect friendship. Duong Li was a poor student who had to work hard as a common labourer in order to finance, seemed well situated for life. When Lu Bin learned that Duong Li's studies were suffering because of the long hours of work, he determined to invite him to live at his home until the triennial examinations. Thereafter, the two friends ceased to study as before. When the examinations were held, Duong Li received the degree as expected and was appointed Mandarin. Lu Bin failed. The wealthy young man returned home despondent. In his despair, he gave himself up to self-indulgence and recklessly squandered his fortune. In desperation, he tried the examinations again, but again met with failure. Recalling that Duong Li was in charge of one of the district administrations in the area, he swallowed his pride and turned to him for assistance. Imagine his horror when Duong Li not only refused to receive him, but ordered his guards to drive him away. Lu Bin trudged on, his small bundle of possessions at the end of a stick. His weary gait and downcast gaze told the story of a man's failure in life. That night, Lu Bin arrived at a small roadside inn and made the acquaintance of the mistress, a comely young woman named Chow Long. She welcomed him with a cup of steaming tea and listened sympathetically as Lu Bin recounted the long story of his failures. Chow Long encouraged him to try again. She suggested that he remain at the inn and promised to help him in every way possible. Freed from the temptations of excessive wealth, Lu Bin devoted himself exclusively to his studies. The tender days passed quickly and the time for the examinations approached. When the results were published, Lu Bin's name was at the top of the list. He returned to the inn with the good news, but to his dismay, Chow Long had disappeared. He searched for her everywhere, but she was not to be found. Finally, the new Mandarin resigned himself to unhappiness and departed for his post. Many years passed until one day, in the execution of his duties, Lu Bin happened to be passing through the district of his old friend, Duong Li. The memory of his friend's ingratitude did not prevent him from paying a visit. This time, Duong Li welcomed his fellow Mandarin with great pleasure and offered him tea. As they were drinking and talking, a woman entered the reception room. She approached the two men smiling. Consternation and astonishment crossed Lu Bin's face, for in the woman he recognized Chow Long, the supposed mistress of the inn. Duong Li then explained to his old friend that to have helped him openly would have produced no reform. Therefore, he had sent his own wife to encourage and aid him until he would pass the examination. He had been willing to make this sacrifice in the name of friendship. And that is why people in Vietnam nod understandably and refer to the example of Duong Li and Lu Bin whenever they hear the story of a deep, unbreakable friendship. The Golden Tortoise. Greatheart and Perfect Nobility had been friends since childhood. Greatheart was rich and Perfect Nobility was poor. One day, Greatheart said to Perfect Nobility, "You lack the necessary funds to set up a business. Let us advance you enough capital for a beginning, and you can pay us back when you are able." Perfect Nobility reflected for a long time. "I should accept," he said to himself. "These friends are kind and sincere. But if I fail in my enterprise, how will I be able to pay off the debt?" He consulted his wife. She shared his scruples, and the two were unanimous in their decision to refuse the offer and resign themselves to a lifetime of poverty. The next day, Perfect Nobility went to the home of his friend. "I thank my brother and sister," he said, "but truly I do not know what kind of business I could go into. I cannot accept your money." During the conversation, Greatheart showed his guest a golden tortoise that he had cast from all the precious metal he and his wife possessed. They chatted a while, drank tea together, and then dozed off. While they were asleep, Greatheart's son entered the room. He saw the golden tortoise on the table and carried it out of the room, intending to play with it. Later, he left for a neighbouring village without returning the tortoise. Shortly after the two friends awoke, Perfect Nobility took leave of his friend without either of them observing that the golden tortoise had disappeared. As soon as Greatheart noticed that the golden tortoise was gone, he questioned his wife about the matter. She replied that she had not touched the tortoise. He did not know what to think, but not for a moment was Perfect Nobility under suspicion. When Greatheart and Perfect Nobility met on the following day, the former said, "Did you by any chance take our golden tortoise to show off to your wife? Please keep it as long as you like." Perfect Nobility and his wife were thus placed in a cruelly embarrassing situation. "We are poor," they said to each other. "If we say that we do not have the tortoise, others will be under suspicion. We must spare our friends this misfortune." Perfect Nobility and his wife sold the few goods that they possessed and went to knock at the door of the richest landlord of the region, Generous Opulence, the owner of immense paddy fields. They threw themselves at his feet and begged him to take them into his service for life, in exchange for the quantity of gold needed to cast another golden tortoise, which they could deliver to Greatheart. As soon as he heard their story, Generous Opulence obtained the necessary gold and gave it to the goldsmith who had manufactured the original tortoise. Thus everything was done in accordance with the wishes of Perfect Nobility and his wife. However, Generous Opulence did not demand that they remain in his service. On their part, Perfect Nobility and his wife refused to leave and remained in the home of their benefactor in order to wait on him, hand and foot. Sometime later, Greatheart's son returned the golden tortoise to the room and was surprised to see a second tortoise there. "Papa, Mama," he cried as soon as he had seen it. "You thought it was lost. Fortunately, I took it." The parents were completely dumbfounded. Of the two tortoises, which was really theirs, and whence came the other? Having suspected the truth,
Greatheart hastened to the home of perfect nobility. He found the house deserted. The neighbours told him that his friends had sold themselves into the service of generous opulence and could be found in the latter's home. Emotionally touched, Greatheart ran there as fast as he could. He sent for perfect nobility, and the two friends burst into tears and embraced heartily. Greatheart desired to deliver the second tortoise into the hands of generous opulence in order to redeem his friend's freedom. But generous opulence answered him thusly, "You have borrowed nothing from me, therefore there is no question of returning anything. As for your two friends, I have never commanded them to remain here. You do not have to redeem them. They have never ceased to be free." It was impossible to arrive at an agreement. Generous opulence would not accept the gold that he had given them. Perfect nobility and his wife considered themselves indentured and refused to leave the service of generous opulence. Greatheart did not wish to keep that which did not belong to him. Finally, they found it necessary to refer the case to the Mandarin. We do not know his decision. The Mountain of Waiting. Before the eyes of the traveller who reaches Lang Son on the way from the delta of North Vietnam to its highland, stretches a range of rocky mountains. Among these mountains is a most unusual one, with a rocky crest carved by nature into the form of a woman holding a small child in her arms. The Vietnamese call this crag Nguy Vong Phu, which means the mountain of the woman waiting for her husband. This is the story they tell of it. Once upon a time, there lived in the highland of North Vietnam a young man just 20 years old. Orphaned of both mother and father and having no other relatives, he lived with his 6-year-old sister in a small cottage on the slope of a hill. Every day at early dawn he went to the forest not far from his house to chop wood. He took the wood to the market to sell for food and provisions. The rest of the day he devoted to his little sister, whom he cherished and cared for lovingly. The brother and sister were very happy in their small cottage until the day a stranger arrived. The newcomer was an old man who, passing by the place one winter evening, asked for lodging. When the brother learned that the passer-by was a prophet, he eagerly requested his guest to foretell the future. The old man referred to his book, and a shadow of amazement passed across his face. He told the young man, "The date and hour of your birth most certainly indicate that you will someday marry your own sister." The young man became terrified. He did not want to believe this, but the old man continued, "It is irrevocable. No one can act against this fate." The prophet went on his way the next morning, but the young man was shocked and stunned by the prophecy. He worried over it for days and months, and at last became mad. He decided to end his dreadful problem, and in this state of mind, he resorted to a desperate solution. One day, he brought his sister with him to the woods. There, the little girl was fascinated, watching and listening to the birds while her brother chopped wood. Suddenly, the young man turned upon the child and struck her across the back with his hatchet. Then he fled the scene, leaving her to perish. He was free from his obsession. But the horror of his crime haunted and tormented him. He did not return to his home and wandered far into the highland. He changed his name and settled somewhere in Langsorn. He was most unhappy and grieved over the terrible thing he had done. However, he gradually lost himself in hard work and at last began to build a new life for himself. 15 years later, he became the proud husband of the daughter of a very rich tradesman. A lovely child was born to complete the happiness of the devoted couple. One day, coming into the backyard, he found his wife drying her hair in the sun. She had removed her upper garments, and when she threw her hair forward to comb it, he saw for the first time a deep, ugly scar on her back. He approached his wife and asked her what had caused the vicious scar. The woman hesitated for a moment and then said in a tearful voice, "I am not the real daughter of the man you know as my father. Originally, I came from a place far away where I lived in a small cottage with my elder brother. He was very kind to me and I loved him dearly. However, one day, 15 years ago, he took me to the woods with him, and for some reason, which I shall never understand, he struck me with his hatchet. Thinking I was dead, he ran from the forest. I was saved by a band of thieves who took me into their den and cared for my wound. Some time later, pursued by the authorities, the thieves escaped and left me behind. The rich tradesman, who had just lost his daughter, took pity on me and adopted me. I have never seen my brother again, and I shall never know why he tried to kill me. We had loved each other very much." The woman's eyes were filled with tears. The man struggled to control his emotion and inquired about the name of her own father and that of her native village. There was not a shadow of doubt. The girl he had married was his own sister. The same relentless feeling swept over him, leaving him horrified and filled with shame. The following morning, he found a pretext to leave his home, promising to return within 6 months. Time went by. 6 months passed, and still the husband had not returned home. Every night at twilight, the anxious wife carried her child to the high peak of the mountain overlooking the road and watched in vain for so many days, months, and years that one day she was turned to stone. There on the lonely mountain peak, mother and child keep their eternal vigil. Thank you for listening.